Rachel McAdams, who was beloved for Mean Girls, almost was never in the movie because she was age-shamed for the part. Sydney Sweeney just flopped big on a new movie, but it's not what everyone wants you to believe. Klein and Hasan Piker are still in a war together where Hasan just dug dirty going against Klein's wife as part of the battle. And hey there everybody, welcome to Attention Span. I'm your host Charles Perallo, and here's a timestamp of every topic we have going on today. We have a lot to unpack, so let's begin. And first up for today we have Chris Pratt. And Chris Pratt is one of the most loved actors in Hollywood, where his movies that he's been the lead of have made $6.5 billion so far, but he's having some issues with the public and now he's being trashed over Donald Trump. And in 2020, Chris Pratt got a lot of controversy because he was the only American in the main cast for Avengers to not come out endorsing Joe Biden, and he wasn't hard left like a lot of the other people like Mark Ruffalo who endorsed Bernie Sanders. This has led to a lot of people to speculate that Chris Pratt's a Republican, mainly because his father-in-law is Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was a Republican governor in California. A lot of people don't realize is Chris Pratt is also related by marriage to Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. That's again by marriage because Chris Pratt's wife, Catherine Schwarzenegger, is also part Kennedy because her mom, Maria Shriver, was a Kennedy, so she's actually RFK Jr.'s first cousin. Coming into RFK Jr., he does have a lot of controversies for reasons that I don't particularly care for him, as well as many other people, which I can just list right here for some of them. But Chris Pratt's now addressed his association with RFK Jr., pointing out that while he doesn't agree with everything he says personally, disagreeing with him on some of the science stuff, he has had Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners with him, and he thinks he's a great guy personally. But there definitely is a lot of heat going on with celebrities where people are trying to basically audit them and figure out if they're Republicans or not, with the big example being Sydney Sweeney, where she got hounded after they found out she was a registered Republican in the state of Florida. But honestly, it's really wrong. We're trying to just audit every actor's politics to make it so we agree their way, and it's also really stupid what we're doing to Chris Pratt, where basically they're trying to just get him to say negative things about his family, which he's not willing to do. That brings us to our next topic, and that's Rachel McAdams. And Rachel McAdams is loved around the world for being hated as Regina George in Mean Girls, but she almost never got the part because she was called too old. When Mean Girls came out, Rachel McAdams was by far the oldest member of the cast, where Amanda Seyfried and Lindsay Lohan were still teenagers, but Rachel McAdams was 25. To put that in perspective, Amy Poehler, who played Rachel McAdams' mom in the movie, was only 32 years old in real life, making her only 7 years older than Rachel McAdams was. Making Mean Girls, they actually ran into the issue in casting that Rachel McAdams wasn't interested in playing the character Regina George. She actually wanted to be Katie Heron, which was played by Lindsay Lohan. But Mark Waters, the director of Mean Girls, said the entire reason he wanted an older actress playing Regina George was he wanted this idea of a high school student who acts like an adult, so the idea of Rachel McAdams playing the character of Katie was just ridiculous to him. The only way they convinced her to do it was they promised that she'd actually get more screen time than both of the other classics combined. Also doing Mean Girls, Lindsay Lohan didn't want to be the character of Katie because she thought the character would end up too similar to her role in Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen, so they wrote the character to be more of a villain. Thankfully, they fixed the casting because that movie totally would have bombed if those roles were reversed. Enough of Mean Girls, moving on to Quentin Tarantino. And Quentin Tarantino is one of the biggest directors of all time, where his movies made $1.9 billion, but he said for one of the franchises he's created, he's out. And in 2019, Quentin Tarantino did his highest budget movie ever with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which was a huge success, making $391 million on a budget of $96 million, making it the highest budget and also the second highest earning Tarantino movie. After the success of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Tarantino proposed a number of ideas to try and keep that universe alive, with one example being doing a film with DiCaprio, which would be a Western that was actually set to be some sort of prequel where it's DiCaprio playing his character's character in the movie. But the reason that idea never developed is Leonardo DiCaprio is a no-sequel, spin-off, or prequel rule, and even though that was technically a completely unique story, DiCaprio wouldn't do it. Instead of that, Netflix decided to do a sequel to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood with Brad Pitt in the lead called The Adventures of Cliff Booth. The only thing is, for the sequel, Tarantino's not actually the director, instead it's my favorite director, David Fincher. And the reason for this, Tarantino sees a huge problem with the legacy of directors, where oftentimes great directors like Francis Ford Coppola have their last movie be their worst movie, like Megalopolis. Tarantino made a rule early on in his career that he would only do 10 movies with the exception of Kill Bill, which he counts as one movie, and so far he's at 9, so he doesn't want to waste the 10th one. And originally Tarantino said his final movie was going to be a movie called The Movie Critic, with Paul Walter Hauser being the main character, but he said even though he made a good script, he didn't make a great script, so he canceled that project. Yeah, I'm still ultimately curious how Tarantino decides to end his career. Speaking of Paul Walter Hauser, that leads us to Sydney Sweeney, and Sydney Sweeney is one of the biggest actresses in the world, but she just had a massive flop, and people are all saying it's due to American Eagle. Sydney Sweeney just released the movie Americana, which only got mediocre reviews, with a 68% with critics on Rotten Tomatoes and 78% with audiences. Money-wise, things have been even worse, where it's not even made $500,000, and even though the budget hasn't been publicly revealed, it's revealed that it cost probably about $5 million to make, so this is a complete and total failure costing $1 million. And a lot of people are saying it's because of the American Eagle ad, where American Eagle saw a 9% decline in foot traffic post the Sydney Sweeney ad, but everyone's saying that is completely wrong. And the real reason the movie failed was it was made in 2023 by a company called Braun Studios, and Braun Studios had a lot of financial issues where they actually went bankrupt in 2023 and never got a chance to release this movie. And it wasn't until about a year later that Lionsgate decided to buy the movie, where they got it at a very cheap price of only a few $100,000 because it was basically in a bankruptcy auction when they got it. So Lionsgate got it and released it, hoping to bank a little bit bit off of Sydney Sweeney's fame, but there was no marketing budget for the movie, and at the same time, 87% of indie movies fail, so this was just a likely flop. Sydney Sweeney did absolutely nothing wrong, but hey, we have to boycott Baskin-Robbins because of her. But now we're going into another topic, and that's Justin Baldoni. And Justin Baldoni is in the fight to save his career right now over his battle with Blake Lively, but things just got worse for him because he has another accuser. And Blake Lively made 3 very big accusations against Justin Baldoni, with the first being that he'd kiss her inappropriately when they weren't filming for the movie It Ends With Us, the second one being that he'd ask a lot of questions about her weight, which offended her, and the third being that he walked into her trailer while she was breastfeeding. But Justin Baldoni's fought back on a lot of those claims, with one big example being this text right here, where he was able to prove Blake Lively invited him into the trailer. And an excuse for asking about Blake Lively's weight because he showed medical records which showed that he did have a back problem and it wasn't the screenplay that he was supposed to pick Blake Lively up, so he was curious if he could do that or not. And Justin Baldoni released a lot of footage showing the making of the movie where he revealed that Blake Lively didn't seem unhappy at all when he was kissing her while they were doing some filming to practice. Isabella Ferrer, who plays the younger version of Blake Lively in the movie, is getting all this press saying Justin Baldoni harassed her, and guess what? It's all BS. Because right now, if you type in Justin Baldoni's name on Google, every single article is trying to make this claim that Justin Baldoni was harassing this actress. The only thing he did was send her a lot of messages asking for information with a text between her and Blake Lively so he can try and get more things for his case. It might be a little bit annoying for Isabella that he's constantly texting her, but he's only texting for information to try and clear his name, which has been completely damaged as well as his career because of Blake Lively's claim. The media is absolutely lying through their teeth to try and make it seem like Justin Baldoni has another accuser when he's just trying to save his career, so all this is total nonsense. And that brings us to our final topic, Ethan Klein. And Ethan Klein is one of the biggest podcasters in the world with 9.8 million followers across social media, but doing so, he has a lot of issues with his former co-host Hasan Piker, who's just come out attacking his wife. In 2021, Ethan Klein and Hasan Piker released a podcast together called The Leftovers, which went for 19 months, going for around 54 episodes. But the reason they ultimately split up was because of Israel, where Ethan Klein isn't a big supporter of Israel, where he says he's not a Zionist, but does think that Jewish people who live there have to stay there, and was horrified by October 7th. Meanwhile, Hasan Piker has had a very different stance on October 7th, saying it was a direct consequence for all the actions Israel has done, and almost made it seem like it was deserved, which caused some issues with Ethan Klein, where he just said there's this whole problem with Hasan where it's like he's glorifying terror. After they split up, Ethan Klein and Hasan Piker are not on good terms at all, where Hasan Piker has responded saying he thinks Ethan Klein is a racist towards Middle Eastern people. And then when Ethan Klein went out of his way to sue people who were pirating his podcast and making money off it, Hasan Piker said nobody was actually interested in pirating his podcast, he didn't have interest, it was all for attention seeking. But now Hasan Piker hit a new low, saying it would be okay to justify violent actions towards people who were veterans of the Israeli military like Ethan Klein's wife Hilla. What he failed to mention is the reason Ethan Klein's wife was part of the Israeli army is they do have a draft, which is why 80% of Israelis are actually veterans of the army, and a lot of celebrities like Natalie Portman, Gene Simmons, Gail Godot, and many more are actually veterans of the Israeli army. Honestly, I think Ethan Klein should pull a Will Smith here, and with that, I'm Charles Peralta. Please subscribe if you learned something.